of Manhattan were 80,000 of the most creative people in this country and just killed. Okay? What did that do to the whole country? What did that do to the whole creative potential of this nation as a whole? Okay? What did it do to the gay community? It put us in the state of shock. It put us into what, and we're manifesting since that time, what I would call post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms. And among those are, I just want to lay low and fit in, okay? Nothing, it's just a society, it's just an approach to the fact that we have gone through this incredible trauma, and, you know, we really haven't come to grips with that. And, you know, that's kind of defines to me where we are today. You know, and I you know, would advocate that something needs to be done. I don't know what it is, no idea, to work through that, so that gay people can be gay people again. Not that we're not. I'm not trying to suggest there's anything wrong with anybody, what anybody's doing, but I would argue that there is the race to assimilation is not necessarily what we ought to be doing and ought to be about. Well, that concludes my remarks.
If anyone has any questions or wants to engage in a conversation, I'll start by just raising your hand.
I have a question. My name is Katrin, and the question I want to ask, I guess, has to do with what about people who, like myself, were just a child during the AIDS epidemic, and so to me, it's something that I didn't live through, and I can feel intense pain, you know, thinking about it or speaking with people who lived through it, and it is part of my consciousness of the gay community, but at the same time, I think not having lived through it, I just kind of wonder what you think that impact has on, I don't know, like where we are and where we're going, in terms of there being like a whole generation of people who just didn't experience that.
Okay, well, I would say two things. First of all, I was in a panel group sponsored by the Blade a couple months ago with younger people who were part of the panel. It was sort of a dialogue between, you know, more mature people and young people and so forth. And one of the more shocking things that came out of that from all of our points of view was the cavalier attitude younger people had about AIDS. And the idea, oh, we're right on the verge of a solution. It's not a problem for us. It's blah, blah, blah. And all of us who, you know, had a little more experience, who'd maybe gone through the AIDS, you know, was one minister there who, you know, I mean, he got choked up when he talked about how many hundreds of people he had, whose bedside he was during the 1980s. And, you know, so, number one, there's that. There's, you know, there needs to be an awareness that this thing is deadly and it could mutate, and it, you know, we could just be at a pause, and, you know, things get much worse, and there needs to be an awareness that how bad this is. And, you know, but the second thing is that your role models are those who, you know, number one, there's a dearth of them because so many people died. But number two, those who survived and those who are setting the model for you are setting a very much more confined model of what your life should be like, you know, for you, right? In other words, you start reading this stuff and, you know, I can't stress enough how good this is, okay? People talking about their personal experiences in the collectives and communes, and trust me, it's not all pretty, you know, it's pretty raunchy sometimes. The number of people who have come, like there's this one author in here, off the streets. I mean, the core of the Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Liberation Movement explosion were homeless kids, right? I mean, kids who either left home to go to San Francisco or New York in the, you know, anti-war, as part of the anti-war movement, the Summer of Love in San Francisco or whatever, who were literally, I mean, sleeping in parking lots and everything, including this one guy who makes this amazing contribution here, who's really grown up to become an incredible poet, and who, I want to at least say his name, I can't, Perry Brass. Some of you may have heard of him, right? His essay in here is one of the best, okay? And he was I want to read you what, because he stumbled into, you know, he was around the corner in a different bar in Greenwich Village when the riot started, right? And he was he walked into his first Gay Liberation Front meeting in November '69, right? But that was 4 or 5 months after the Stonewall riots. He said, leading up to that, I'd seriously attempted suicide at 15. After a year of high school hazing and harassment, I had survived the public housing project where I lived with my sister and mother, the only Jewish family there, where I could not walk down the streets without redneck kids yelling, hey, Jew, queer, sissy, fairy. And a year at the University of Georgia where I had death threats in my dorm. And at the summer of my 17th year, hitchhiking from Savannah to San Francisco, crawling with queers, I heard, a summer of sleeping between parked cars, eating out of back alley restaurant garbage cans, living in SRO hotels. But then he came to New York. He was at his famous old bar, Greenwich Village bar that's actually still there. Julius? Anybody been there? You're a much too young crowd to hang out at Julius these days. But then it was the hottest bar in Greenwich Village when he came out of the bar to see the riot lights, squads of cops, street kids gathered in corners, hippies lying and milling about. I was thrilled for the first time we'd fought back. Constant crippling passivity and hammered-in loneliness of the bars, the cringing fear of the hunched shoulders just walking in, the arrogant mafia goons at the door, all had been ripped away. I loved it, ebullient, but some of my preppier Julius friends were less so. I'll let it blow over, one Ivy League graduate pronounced. Everything was so good for us. We had our bars, our beaches, our restaurants. Now the girls have blown all that. Okay? I didn't want to see him again, that innate southern rebelliousness, take no shit attitude in me that was balled up inside could finally be released, even as shy as I was. And then, you know, he goes on and joins the GLF. He contributes to the first 8 issues of their Come Out newspaper, which I already quoted from, you know. And the whole thing was come out of the bars and into the streets, right? And, you know, even the Come Out newspaper, there were only like 8 issues of it before it died, right? It was like a flare-up, you know. And the same with the Gay Sunshine. It got co-opted by a jerk who turned it into a literary publication. You know, others of these institutions just didn't really survive very long. But, you know, too many of these people and the friends of the people that wrote these things, and, you know, my friends and so forth, just did not survive the 80s. And are not around to be the leadership as grown adults today. Yes, Ben.
Do you think there are parallels between 40 years ago and all the online activism that's taking place now, and offline for that matter? And if so, what do you think of those parallels?
Well, you know, I think that first of all, you just can't, you know, I consider myself having been extremely fortunate to be right in Berkeley. Right? I consider myself to have been right in the center of where all this was going on. And at the same time, there were the big marches. At the same time, you know, when they invaded Cambodia, downtown Berkeley was trashed, you know, in a big march, and there was lots of anger, and police cars turned over, and, you know, put on fire and everything else. And, you know, there was just that electricity was in the air, and everything was like, you know. It's not the same because it is being mobilized on the internet. I mean, it's a different thing. It's being done electronically now, you know. I mean, but I honestly saw we had one of the biggest office in Virginia of Obama for president last fall was in Falls Church. And that place was just absolutely teeming with activity. I mean, the people were there of all ages, not just young people. But that office was just overloaded with people. And that was felt a lot like the old days, you know. Granted, it was directed to getting a presidential candidate elected, and it was not smash the church, smash the state, right? But, you know, the energy was there. Smash the state.